Hi, I'm here to talk to you about AWS Amplify today. AWS Amplify is a set of tools and services that enables mobile and front-end web developers to build secure, scalable, full-stack applications, all powered by AWS. My name is Gerard Sanz and I'm a developer advocate for Amplify. Today, I'm going to show you how to create an app using a GraphQL API to store and retrieve your favorite restaurants in a cloud database using Amplify. I'm going to pick Angular, and you can see the few pieces that make Amplify framework. So we have Amplify CLI, Amplify libraries, and Amplify UI components. So let's make sure that you have the latest versions of Node and NPM installed. And if you don't currently have an AWS account, this is a good time to create one. You can follow the instructions here. There's a video. You can follow the steps there, or you can also follow the manual instructions that you will find in the Getting Started for Angular. So I recommend you to follow through this, and then we can get started building our restaurant app. Before we do that, let's see a small demo so I can demonstrate what we are going to build. So the first thing that we can see is that we have like two routes, login and home. And for the login page, we have a form. So let's go ahead and create an account. This is the first time that I'm using the app. Once I enter the details, I can go ahead and create the account. I receive an email, so I can check the email and enter this code. So I confirm, and I'm being welcomed. So I can see a welcome message. Hello, Gsans, that's my username. And I also have the option to sign out. This is the login page. If we go to the home, we can see there are some options. There's a form where I can enter details of my favorite restaurants that I created. So this is pretty much it. Another thing that we are going to be showing is the real-time features. So now if any other users go ahead and create new restaurants, they will be shown in this screen as well in real time. So that's also a very cool feature that we can demonstrate in this tutorial. So let's go ahead and start creating the app. The first step that I want to show you is just making sure that we have the latest version of the Angular CLI. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create our app using ng-new. And I'm going to use Amplify app as the name. So that's going to scaffold my Angular application. I'm going to use Angular routing just to manage these login and home pages. I'm going to use like CSS. So I'm going ahead and creating this, and that will set up our project. Let's make sure that everything is working. The first change is going to involve the tsconfig.app.json. So let's bring that file up, and we need to include the nodes in the compiler options. The next thing will be to the polyfills. Here we're gonna add this code, and the next thing is gonna be installing all the dependencies. So let's bring that terminal up, and I'm going to go ahead and install all these dependencies. If you see, we are using the auth module, the API module, and the pub sub, together with Amplify UI Angular. One nice thing about separating every category in a different library is that the bundle size is much smaller. The next thing I'm going to do is make sure that the Amplify CLI is using the latest version. So let's run this command. And right now, you would need to run Amplify configure if this is the first time that you have used Amplify. And this is also part of the prerequisite. So you should be already done this. If not, just go back to the getting started of Angular and follow the steps there. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to move into the Amplify init. And this will just set up our project with some sensible defaults. So I'm going to use Amplify app. That's the default for my application. And here it's asking me if I want to create an environment, and I'm going to use dep as the default. It also detects that we're using Visual Studio Code. Let's pick that. And for this option, we are going to go ahead with JavaScript. We are using Angular, and just notice this option we need to change, as otherwise later on it won't be the right folder. So I'm going to add the name of our app, so that will be working nicely. For the build command and start command, I'm going to leave the defaults. And I'm going to use the AWS profile. I already have like some other AWS profiles that I've used before for workshops. And for this example, for this tutorial, I'm going to stick with default. Now, after we have gone through this step, we will have a new folder, Amplify, with all the configurations for our front end and back end. Let's start adding authentication. To add authentication, we just need to run amplify add auth. So let's do that. And then we are going to use the default configuration. And for now, we're going to let our users sign up using their username. And we are not going to use any advanced settings. So now that is done, we can run amplify push. So we can set these changes on the back end. Let's answer yes. We can see the new category and also the resource name that we just created. So let's go ahead and continue. We can also access this information with Amplify status. Okay, so the next thing is configuring the Angular application to set up Amplify. So let's go to main ts And we can do that setup here. So I'm going to copy this code, and you can see that these are exactly the dependencies that we installed, and we are reading from these AWS exports, which contains our configuration, linking this application with your AWS account. And after this, we will have a fully functional Amplify app. So let's save that. Next thing that are we gonna add is the Amplify UI Angular module. So let's add this to our imports. Next thing, we are gonna add the Amplify Authenticator to our app component HTML view. So let's do that. And one thing that we can do is, once you have that code, we will also display the information for the authenticated user. So one way to do that is we can import the auth instance and call current authenticated user and logging that information out. Okay, so you will be able now to log in and see the authentication flow as we shown in the initial demo. And that's all there is to it. We can go ahead and add our GraphQL API. In order to do so, we are going to run Amplify add API. Pick the first option. We're going to call it Restaurants API. And we are going to pick API key. There's other options that we can use. We're going to pick Restaurants API as the description. 7 days just for this test, and we don't have any more settings to set up. We don't have a previous schema to work with, so we're going to pick no. And for this tutorial, I'm going to pick the first template. And this is just a single object. If you want to use relations, one-to-many relations, you can use this second template. So let's go ahead and edit the schema that was created for us. And we are going to replace it with this other schema. Let's save. And before we continue, what we want to do is run Amplify push. We can see the auth category and the API, the new API category that we have created, so we can go ahead. Now Amplify is asking if we want to generate the code for this schema. We're going to say yes, and we're going to pick Angular. You can also use plain TypeScript. That's how Amplify is going to find our GraphQL queries, mutations, and subscriptions by looking at this GraphQL extension. And we're going to generate all of the operations in order to create, update, delete, and also listen to real-time changes on our restaurants. So let's pick yes as well. We also have a way to limit how deep the queries for our clients will be. So this will be 2. And we're going to generate our code in this class. So let's pick the default. So as a result, we have here a GraphQL endpoint that will be our endpoint to access the restaurants API. And we also have a GraphQL API key to secure this access. So every time that we want to use our GraphQL API console, what we can do is run Amplify console API, and that will allow us to open the console. We can pick our API type. So this is a GraphQL API, and that will open this console for us. So from here, we can run some queries. The first one that I want to run is a mutation, and this one will just create a new restaurant. So let's look at this query. So we start with a mutation. We can pick a name for the mutation. If we have different mutations, that will allow us to differentiate between those. And then we have this create restaurant mutation. So we can see the definition here, and that's taking an input, which are all the details for that restaurant. Then we can also pick the results, and we want to shape the results by picking all the fields. And we can also see the definition for each of the fields. An interesting thing that we can use as well from this UI is the documentation on the right side. So we can also run searches. We're going to look for this create restaurant. And we can see that it returns a restaurant type, and we can pass the arguments which are a create restaurant input. This input type has been created for us, and we can see that it contains all of the fields from our restaurant type. So this will be very convenient, and you can use also this Documentation Explorer for queries and also subscriptions. So let's go back to our mutation and create a new restaurant. Let me pick this mutation, and that will be the result. As a result, we are going to display the ID, the name, the description, and the city as we specified in our query. And the next thing that I want to demonstrate is how we can list the restaurants. So a simple query that we call list restaurants, and that's going to come back with items, and then from that list of items we can see the details of our restaurant. So let's do the same. Let's navigate now from the query. We can see that we have two options: get restaurants by ID, or list restaurants with some other options that include filter, limit, and next token. So in this example, I want to use list restaurants, and I'm not going to use any of these arguments for now. Then that returns a model restaurant connection. This will allow us to do pagination, and we can see how we use the items, and then that will return a list of restaurants, and we can pick the fields by choosing the field names. All right, so let's run this second query, and now we can see that we have two items. We can also collapse the information to see the different details. Sometimes we have a lot of items on the results, so you can also do that. And finally, I want to show you how Amplify has also created filters, which are really useful. So in this case, we have the same list restaurants query, but we are making use of the filter. For the filter, we can pick one of the fields. in this case the city, and we're going to look for New York. We have seen that the list of restaurants now contains 2 restaurants. The first one is from London, the second one is from New York, so we should expect just one result. Let's run this query, and we can see that we just returned one result. So it's working as expected. If we look here, we can also see that we can get, with option space, we can get all of the different options. So here I can see all of the fields that I can use, and let's see for city if we can do any more filters. We can also use these options. For now, we are just going to show contains. So this is pretty much it. This was all created by Amplify by using add model and creating all of the APIs that you can use in your code and also in your resolvers. So now that we have created some queries and mutations, let's see how we change our client to list the restaurants on the UI. And here I have the code for a component that it's showing that list of restaurants. The first thing that I added here is all of the imports for authentication, also for API, which is the GraphQL API, and also PubSub. The next thing is I'm importing the API service that was created in the last step, and also I created this restaurant type. So let's look at this restaurant type. If we look at it, it's just exactly following the GraphQL schema, but now using TypeScript. Okay. So the next thing, we have also some imports. This is in order to be able to create, but we're going to skip this for now. What we're going to focus is how we are going to use that API service. So the first thing that we do is we create a local property to hold a list of arrays. That will be an array of restaurants using that restaurant type that we created. We're going to use the constructor using dependency injection to have access to the API. And during ng-init, what we are going to do is we are going to call this API with list restaurants that was created for us when running Amplify push, and we are going to set the list of the restaurants from the event looking at the items as we saw from the query. So let's see how the view for this looks like. Here we have a div with an ng-for looking at the list of restaurants, and then for each of them we are rendering the city, the name, and the description. So that would be all of these steps to add the list of restaurants in our UI. The next thing that I want to look at is how to perform mutations. So let's look back at how we did that. And one thing that I did is I imported from Angular forms the form builder, the form group, and the validators. I'm going to create my form using this ng-on-init code snippet that's going to create this group, and I'm going to require name, description, and city to follow my GraphQL schema. And then on the view, I'm going to use that form so I can gather the information from the user. And the way I did that is I linked my form with my fields. So this is the control name that I use to create my form. On ng-submit, I'm gonna call onCreate with the value from that restaurant that I've used. And here I can see on my component how I link that. So I'm taking that onCreate And then using the same API, I'm going to create the restaurant. The details come in this restaurant field, and this is just an object with a property with each of the different fields, and then I can just reset that form. So that's how I implemented creating new restaurants. The next thing I want to show you is how to introduce GraphQL subscriptions. And this is how we will be notified when a new restaurant is created by another user. So let's see that. So what we did is on ng-init, we introduce a subscription to new restaurants. And that was created for Amplify under the name onCreateRestaurantListener. So we can subscribe to that, and the events coming from this observable will be the new restaurants. And that will follow this object shape, which is the event with a value coming from that mutation. And that mutation will be exactly the same of the subscription in our schema. Then I can go ahead and create this new restaurant. I'm going to use the new restaurant before the existing restaurant, so that will come on top. For this example, I also introduce the same for when I delete restaurants. So whenever a user adds or removes restaurants, I will be notified on real time, and then I would be able to sync with my view. For the delete restaurant, this is a little bit different because I need to find out what restaurant was there and filter it out. So that's a slightly change that I need to do on my code. So let's see the UI, and this is the result from our coding. We can see we have Mamma Mia, which we created during the initial demo, and we also have the new restaurant that we created through the console. So let's demonstrate the real-time features. On the left I have a Chrome instance, on the right I have a Firefox instance, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna interact. And for example, what we can do is remove the restaurant here, and we can see how the Firefox instance have removed. I can do the same. I can do the same when I create a new restaurant, and you will see that both are always in sync. So now, for example, if I use the Firefox instance to remove this restaurant, it will also be synchronized with the Chrome instance, which is very cool. So we have seen how we created some new restaurants from the AppSync console. We also created the UI to create new restaurants, also delete restaurants, and synchronize this in real time. So now I'm going to show you how you can publish this application and share it. And in order to do that, I'm going to use another command, which is amplify at hosting, and that will allow us to publish this application live. So let's run this command. I'm going to use Amazon CloudFront and S3, and in this tutorial I'm going to use the dep option. So that will be the S3 bucket, will host my application, and I'm going to pick the index HTML for the website, both for the index and also the error. And now that we have set up the hosting, we can run Amplify Publish. And that's all you have to do in order to create and publish an Amplify app that will give you access to your favorite list of restaurants. If you want to follow a workshop that will give you all of these features and more, you can go to GSAN's AWS Amplify Workshop UI Angular, and that will give you all of the instructions step by step to get what we have built today. And in case you need the final project, you can also find it at GSAN's AWS Amplify Workshop UI Angular solution. That's all. Thank you for listening.